college, they have a family practice residency program. We have about 20 residents in the organization. So we could have queues at times of the day. And what the number of devices that we have, it really takes that queue process out. It also positions us so that when we move forward, which we hope to do in the future with physician order entry, which is another piece of the medication era pie, we've already set the stage for plenty of access and taken that out as an issue for the medical staff. Does that answer your question? Charting flexibility and network redundancy. One of the things we found is that one of the greatest advantages of this is when your network is down, your wireless system isn't down. So if you're doing work, if you're doing upgrades on your network, if you're taking anything down other than the basic CPU that this works on, you have essentially a redundant network in place, and it's saved us a lot. I mean, it's really been a helpful thing for us when we've been able to say you can still chart. You can't chart at the nursing station shelf, you can still chart at the bedside. And the stress reduction I only bring in because I've had personal comments come back to me from RNs that along these lines, that when I used to have these pieces of paper in my pocket, I at times would go home at night and I would wake up and say, oh my God, did I chart that or didn't I? I can't remember if I did or I didn't. And I've had a number of friends tell me that with the process in place at the bedside, it takes that away. They know they've charted it, but then they go home, they don't have to have, they're doing it as they go. And it takes some stress out of your nursing staff in that respect. All right, so what can go wrong? Actually quite a bit. So if you're going to do this, you got to think about it. And I think Tom mentioned some of the issues. We'll only go through a few of them. It's really shared technology. It's not a dedicated technology. So all of those different units, if they're all in place at one time, in theory, you can have enough traffic to cause collisions. So that's another issue you have to think about. You need to be able to manage that. We've limited it to IP applications. We don't support any of the IPX traffic. We don't do any of the Microsoft Office tools or anything else on the unit. Only IP, and IP is essentially just this application. We've started to toy with putting our internal intranet on the unit so people have access to that, but we've gone slowly with that. We really wanted it to be dedicated to this particular application and not have the use of this application be diluted by other kinds of issues.
Just a question on the equipment then. I think you said you were using 233s, but you don't really have to have hard drives. You don't have to have CD-ROMs. You don't have to have any of those other kinds of things.
No, I'm going to talk about that actually. I'm going to make that. That's a good point, and I'm going to reinforce that in a second. Another issue is you really have to be sure that you've done your site survey accurately. So you want to. We've brought in the Proxim, and we work with HBOC and their network technicians to do the site survey. We've sort of written into the contract something to issues to ensure that we're going to get the performance that we want. But it can be an issue because you can have lead walls, you can have other kinds of frequency interference, and so you really want to be sure you're using somebody you can trust that's going to do this analysis appropriately for you. We did have one case, interestingly enough, early on where the frequency that this was using was being used by a security device in our nursery area that was monitoring the baby movement or abduction program. And we were having conflicts in that area. It doesn't happen all the time, but when the two came into contact with each other. So we had to go back and actually get the security company to change their frequency, which is only a slight change, but it was an issue for a while. So something you have to think about. Another real problem that we've had with the portable technology is battery life. That seems like you don't think about that, but when the unit goes dead, it gets very frustrating for people. So what we set up is we set up special charging stations near where the cart-mounted units are. And we've done a lot of training with nurses about the importance of plugging those in when they're sitting there. And I can't emphasize that enough because you get a lot of negative feedback. The darn thing doesn't work because it's dead. Keyboard covers are important. You don't want, it's easy for people to be bringing stuff around and have spillage and that sort of stuff. So we use keyboard covers to keep the integrity of the unit in place. The mice go all the time. So you have to almost have a stock of external mouse parts on the floor so that people can replace those without having to call your help desk. And here's one that I can't emphasize enough. You don't lock this thing down. If you don't have a real strong policy around what you're going to let people do with it, it's going to drive your support staff absolutely crazy. And we just found that until we used Windows 95 policies and really restricted what people could do, it comes back to Rich's point about hard drives and floppy disks. You don't want them used for that purpose. If they're going to do that, go back to the nursing station and work with them. But you don't want that to happen on these issues. So we've developed a standard laptop image. Essentially, it's just fixed, and if there's any problem, we bring it back, we put the image back on. We actually have swaps. We swap one in to replace the image, and that's how we manage it. And it really streamlines the support side. If you don't do that, your cost justification can really take a hit because you're adding people to deal with these laptops on an ongoing basis. And then the last thing I guess I'd point out, and I think Tom mentioned this a little bit, this is technology that's changing rapidly. There's really no standards yet. There's multiple vendors competing for what the standard ought to be for 11 megabits per second. 802.11b standard is being promoted by Cisco, Lucent, Nortel. You also have Bluetooth, which is being promoted by Motorola, Nokia, IBM, Home RF. As you can see, I mean, I don't know who's going to win out in this, and you have to think about the fact that you may end up with a technology in place that may not be a standard down the road. It may not matter if you get enough use out of it and you get the value back and you move on, or it may matter. I think that's, I have one more slide. Yes, and Tom spoke to this also. Clearly, where we're going with the convergence of voice and data with the WAP technologies and some of the things that we're looking at doing, the PDA technology, which is another whole forum next year that Kennedy will be putting on, I'm sure, to be talking about all of the issues around managing PDAs in your environment. Not to mention, one you didn't really mention that I labor with a lot is the whole issue of confidentiality and compliance with HIPAA. The last thing I want to do is have a resident leave their palm file in a restaurant and have the owner pick it up and see clinical data on there for somebody he knows and be on the front page of our newspaper. And I lose sleep over that. But with that said, our residents are doing just what you said, Tom. They're using it, and we've got to deal with it. And then the issue that 11 megabits is certainly not the end of the evolution. It's going to get faster. It's going to get cheaper. But we really don't know yet how that's going to play out or how soon that's going to happen. I think that's it. Yep. Questions? Dennis?
Can you give us an idea of what it costs you per access point or per unit to install a contract?
Let me think about that one. I think it was about $350,000 to implement the wireless technology everywhere except for Family Place. So we haven't put the 11 megabit per second in our 25-bed family women's health unit. We call it our Family Place. So those numbers apply to the rest of the organization. But I could get that number for you, get back to you. I don't really have it.
So the rest of the organization was the 20 access points?